there. I'm your host, Leslie Randolph. I'm a self-confidence coach for teenage girls and the self-confidence coach you wish you had as a teen. Honestly, I'm the self-confidence coach I wish I had as a teen because I know I could have saved myself and my mother a whole lot of heartache if I'd only known then what I know now. I hope to save you some of that suffering by sharing the lessons I learned late in life right here on Why Didn't They Tell Us? Welcome to the show. Hey, happy people. Welcome back to Why Didn't They Tell Us? So I am so excited for today's show. This one is very personal to me, and that is why I'm going to start the episode with a very personal story. It was a couple years ago that my daughter was at her elementary school when an alarm went off. And it was one of the active shooter drills that are now so norm and expected in our kids' elementary schools. This one wasn't expected or normal because while it was a drill, no one at the school knew that it was happening. Not the teachers, not the administrators. It truly was a surprise to everybody. And so the reactions to it were very human and very raw from everyone there. Now, luckily for my daughter, an amazing and wonderful woman named Amy Haggerty was in her classroom that day, at that moment. And Amy is from an amazing, incredible organization called KNOWTICE that teaches mindfulness to elementary school students, to humans of all ages and stages. But one of the areas in which they focus is bringing mindfulness to classrooms. And Amy, using every tool in her toolkit, was thrown into the deep end of what it means to use mindfulness when you really need it. Thank you to Amy forever for her ability to keep that classroom as calm as it could be in one of the most stressful and heightened emotional moments of what I can imagine anyone's life to be. And my daughter, if you've been in my world for a while, you can imagine my daughter feels very big feelings. And in that moment, she was feeling a lot of them. And Amy took her and allowed her to help lead the breathing and the mindfulness exercises that KNOWTICE leads in every classroom. Not typically when you need them most. But she took care of Anna in that moment. And Anna came home that day, and we had all, as parents, had known what had happened. And Anna told me about this wonderful woman and this wonderful program. And as a parent, I reached out to thank them from the bottom of my heart for teaching our students one of the most critical life skills that they will ever need. Whether it is in a moment like that, or when you are presenting to the class or presenting to the boardroom of how do we quiet our minds and just notice what is happening and take care of ourselves through those moments. One email turned into many, and I very quickly started a love fest with this organization and the incredible people behind it. To one day we had lunch, and I think at that lunch, I just quietly or maybe very boldly was like, I need to come and work for you. I need to be doing what you're doing, because we cannot cultivate self-confidence in our tween and teen years without a foundation of knowing how to calm and sometimes quiet those other emotions that take up so much of our emotional real estate that might get in the way of self-confidence, taking that courageous action. We need to learn how to calm our body before we have access to that bestie brain that says, you've got this. I'm cheering you on. Let's go. So I said today was personal. Today, I have the executive director and one of my fellow mindfulness facilitators from KNOWTICE joining us. The mission of KNOWTICE is to bring mindfulness teachings into classrooms, communities, workspaces, and healthcare facilities. Using a science-based curriculum that addresses life's everyday stressors, KNOWTICE helps develop happier and healthier communities, as well as equips individuals with proven strategies, including how to improve focus and self-regulation. And the incredible human behind it today is Julie Freeman. A licensed school social worker, Julie spent years counseling children and teens. I stole this from Julie's bio because I love it so much. Julie believes that when we teach and talk openly about matters of the heart and our shared human experience, we strengthen the connections that bind us all together. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm
happy to be here.
Oh, no one's happier than me. No one's happier than me. So I told my origin story. Tell me your origin story of how you got to be the executive director and mindfulness facilitator of KNOWTICE and how KNOWTICE came to be.
Well, in 2017, I started after longingly wanting to get involved with a studio called Full Bloomed Lotus in Wilmette, run by Ramakrishna. And I think I've been a seeker and a thinker my whole life. I came by it very honestly. And I got to a stage in my life where my kids were now a little older. My eldest was in high school and there were challenges going on in her world, which were challenging me as a parent. And so I finally signed up to take one of her meditation classes. And so it began. It was a language and an understanding and something I really needed in my life to sort of, and it was a lot of mindfulness based education. It was a lot of Eastern philosophy, and it really helped ground me as a human being, as a mother, as a wife, as a friend, and helped me deal with lots of things going on in my world and how to really, come from a very authentic place in myself, to honor who I was, to clear out things that needed work. And so I started doing a lot of work with her, and I started taking classes. One time I left class and there was all these cute little photos and things out in the hallway and drawings from kids, and it looked like stuff they were doing in schools. And so I went up to her one day and I said, I'm curious to know about all that stuff in your lobby, and what do you do in the schools? And she said, oh, well, we're actually having a meeting on Friday to talk more about how we can engage the schools with this curriculum and this education. Why don't you come to the meeting? I said, okay. And so I showed up at Panera in Wilmette, and I met, 7 other like-minded women. That was actually the first time I met Katie Colby, who I would say has been sort of my partner in all of this. And that was our first meeting, and we hit it off right away. And I started to learn what they were trying to do. And Rama was trying to start a non-for-profit and sort of set up a more defined program to go into schools to raise money and to help sort of lower the cost to bring teachers in so that we could do the kind of work she was doing with adults with kids in schools. And that was how it started. And we rolled out a K-8 program in the 2018. And actually, I think it was the fall of 2019. We rolled it out in the fall of 2019. And it was a huge success. The school loved it, and we had a 2-year contract with them. And then COVID hit the following March. And you know how that story goes. Everyone around the world knows how that story goes. And slowly but surely, the kids weren't in school and everything changed in an instant. The way we did life was no longer. So then fast forward into 2021, and Rama decides, I'm not sure I want to give all of myself to this program, because she still very much was busy with her studio and teaching her classes and doing retreats. And that was really, I think, where her love was. And while she loved this idea of teaching kids, it was just became a much bigger operation than she could participate in. So she kind of set us all free. And then that fall of 2021, when everybody did go back to school, masked, but school was back in session, District 35 called and said, we want you guys to come back to school with us. Rama called me and she said, will you do it? Would you run the program for them? And I said, okay, sure, because I love the work. I loved what we were doing. I came alive when I got back into the classroom with these kids. I took time off from being a social worker to raise my kids. I wanted to do that in some way. I called Katie. She was on board. I called Becky, who's one of our teachers, and Lisa, who's also one of our teachers. And I said, they all did the first year of Glencoe. And I told them what happened. And I said, would you guys teach with me? And they said, yes. And so the 4 of us taught the entire program. Katie took a school, I took a school, and Lisa and Becky split the middle school. So we each taught like somewhere between, I think, 18 to 13 classes a week individually. We each did the whole school. But it worked. And I set up an LLC, I invoiced them, and it was great. And then my husband had this great idea, and he said, I think you should turn this into something. I think you should start a non-for-profit, and like you should do this all in like other schools too. It shouldn't just be in a school like Glencoe where they have the resources and they figured out how to bring you in. I said, well, it is a non-for-profit. I said, Rama started this whole thing. He said, well, why don't you call her? So I did. She said, oh my goodness, Julie, the way the universe works, she said, I told myself if I didn't hear about, if nobody reached out about it, or if I put it out in the universe because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know if I wanted to keep like maintaining all the like the name and the business, that if I didn't hear from anything by the end of 2022, I was going to dissolve it. She said, so the fact that she's like, and I said that a week ago in like prayer or meditation. And so we did. We took the whole thing over and then we just kind of grew from there, and we have grown very organically. We've gotten ourselves into a couple more schools. So that's the origin.
I get to be part of, the tailwind of success. I mean, I shouldn't say tailwind because we're going so many places.
No, you're in.
I'm in, and I'm so lucky. I know it's a big question. Why do you think mindfulness matters, particularly for our elementary school students?
Well, in psychology, they actually say by the age of 8, your personality is formed, which is kind of frightening if you think about it because you have so much more life to live. But they say kind of who you are, your, ideology, your makeup is pretty much formed at that point. So if you think about that, and you think about how malleable kids are and how much they're learning, even this concept of how we talk about the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until they're 20. There's all this wonderful research out there that says mindfulness and meditation strengthens that part of our brain. And as we know, our kids' prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, right? It's kind of what we're always struggling with as parents. So, but if we get into these schools and we get in to start working with these kids at young ages, and we give them sort of this groundwork and this context to things that are already happening, things they're already thinking, things they're already feeling, things they innately know. I like to say I'm not teaching these kids anything they don't know. We're giving them words and context to what's already going on in their body. And if we can do it at a young age, we can start to build better habits. Because again, this is where, if your personality is already formed, don't you want to know how to work with your personality? We're not trying to change personalities, right? You can't do that, right? If you're somebody who's, like you said, your daughter is very emotional, or she's very, sensitive, or she's whatever, she feels big, right? I don't want to change that because there's so much beauty in that. But you need to know how to work with it too, because you can get swept up in those emotions. And so we give kids the tools and the information to say, like, get to know yourself now, especially by age 8. What are kids in 2nd grade, 3rd grade by then? So they're pretty young. But like, start to understand who you are, how you operate, what triggers you, and what are the types of things you can do to help yourself so you don't get into a world of trouble if you get swept up in your personality, So I think that's why it's so important we do it now. And I think how Rama's program started was all these women who were sitting around on the floor in meditation circles with her, talking about years of trauma and, stuff that they were dealing with from years in their life, right? And how it was affecting relationships and marriages and raising children and all the life stuff. How could we help avoid people doing that in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, not even 20s, but like 30s, 40s, and 50s, trying to unpack this so that you can have a more fruitful, fulfilling life and not be so dragged down by, the stuff that inevitably gets to you, because life's going to happen to everybody, right? And so if we can teach it to them at a young age and start building healthy habits, that's the idea.
100%. And I love what you're saying of like getting to know yourself, because, and talking about like what triggers you, right? So I think so much of what we do, what we talk about in the classroom, particularly in mindfulness, is noticing our feelings, right? And noticing what that physically feels like in your body. Like I know that we talk a lot right now about anxiety and stress. And if we can identify like, oh, that vibration, that sensation, that is my body's way of telling me I am anxious. And, Julie, especially with this microphone, I'm going to always look at it through the confidence lens, right? And so when sometimes like anxiety has such a purpose, and we are so thankful that our body and our brain are so good at keeping us safe and keeping us alive. And thank you, anxiety, for that. But sometimes anxiety is ringing the alarm. And if we are able to notice it and say, oh, here's anxiety, and then also discern the source of it, then maybe we can negotiate with it, right? Because sometimes anxiety is a beautiful thing and it really helps us. Sometimes anxiety, though, can really hold us back and can keep us stuck and might think something is dangerous that really isn't. But it's like almost befriending that emotion and like befriending ourselves, like all these different parts of me. And so we want to educate our kids in how to notice what's going on within them. And once they understand the patterns, then have the ability to discern of like, okay, is this a real threat, or is this like little t threat? And can I find my way out of it? And I had said earlier, but the first thing we need to do is always like calm that body. So what are some of the ways some of your favorite ways of teaching these young people how to calm their bodies and brains?
Well, it's interesting. They're pretty simple techniques. I say this to the kids. Mindfulness is not hard to do. It's hard to remember to do. It's very easy to try it, right? You're like, oh, that was it. I even think the simplest thing we teach kids right away, the very first week, is how to have a mindful body, which is really to just pause and just put your body in a still position, which to some kids sounds like punishment. And I try to say, you're not in trouble. I'm not asking you to sit still or calm down or take a deep breath. We talk about how sometimes that's sort of, people say that in like a negative way. But I say like, here's the reason why someone's asking you to do that. Let's feel what it feels like to just still our bodies. And 98% of the time I get the feedback of, legitimately just, put your feet on the ground, or if you're in your desk, or just like sink your seat into your chair, put your hands in your lap and just sit in stillness for 10, 20 seconds and notice how that feels. Eventually we add the breath and we close our eyes and we listen to the sound of the dog. We build on that, but even just that can be really calming. And a lot of the kids will say, I feel calm. It got really quiet in here. I like to tell the kids when I do that, especially when I'm teaching, when I take that pause, I can feel all the energy that's built up in me just from coming into the classroom and sitting down and getting ready to present. I can feel all the energy start to sort of settle, right? And if we're always operating here, it's not great. Yes, you're productive and you're getting stuff done, but sometimes maybe you're being a little impulsive, or you're forgetting things, or you're sharp toned, or maybe you're short tempered, or whatever it might be, or maybe you're just someone who can function at a 10 at all times. But it's really important for your body to just give yourself that pause. So it's just simple little things you can try to sort of like reset. Just give yourself these little resets throughout your day and give yourself a little attention, right? Because we go, go, go. Even kids, they go, go, go from the minute they wake up in the morning. Parents are, put your shoes on, get your backpack, go get dressed, brush your teeth. Where's your homework? Do you have your best stuff for after school today? Do you have your lunch? Do it's like they're reeling too. Then there's an argument or something blows up in the kitchen before you leave, or the parents yell, whatever it might be, right? They're carrying that around with them. So it's like, when we walk into the classrooms and we give them this pause, it's like such a gift. And you can do it whenever you want. Get to your desk in the morning and just take a seat and just chill for a second. Don't put pressure on yourself to socialize. Don't feel like you've got to have the whole day figured out. Just give yourself a pause. Like, if we can just teach a pause, and we have to right now, like now more than ever, there is no built-in pause anymore. We are in a time with technology where there's so much coming at us at all times. Put it this way, our kids come home with news stories before we even are able to share it with him. We didn't watch the news when we were kids. Who wanted to watch the 10 o'clock news when you were in fifth grade? Now it's all over their, if kids have devices or TikTok or Instagram, it's all there all the time. YouTube, like their accessibility to the world and to information that is probably beyond what their bodies can handle. So we have to provide opportunity to teach them how to regulate.
So funny that you say that. When you said, like, we're not supposed to be at a 10, I used to joke, like, I think I've been at a solid 7 for like 30 years straight, right? Like that was just my operating level. And what I found, and I think it kind of speaks to what you said about, the women who came to Rama, it's not a sustainable pace. And I think for our young ones, they might not realize that yet, right? Like for me, and I'm not joking, it worked for like 30 years. It worked till it didn't. And there's this old adage of like, give yourself a break or your body will take one for you. Like, and probably at the worst time ever. And that's sort of what had happened to me, of like, my body was like, we can't do this anymore. And it started, rather than like quietly whispering that it needed a break, it started screaming. And I didn't have mindfulness then. I didn't have that internal check-in. So I really just thought something was like I thought I was dying. I thought something was terribly wrong with me. But I always, the theme of this podcast, if I had known then what I know now, I wish I had just known, like, no, maybe what I did need. And I love what Julie said. Nothing we teach at Notice, or even in coaching, frankly, is revolutionary. It's not. It is not rocket science. It is simple, but it is not easy. And it is not easy to use. And it's not just for our kids, right? Like, I think about as moms, Julie, how many times have you not given yourself that powerful pause before you react, right?
Yeah. How's this? I wish I had more of this information when I was a young, that I wasn't so reactionary, that I wasn't so, willed into like making sure my kids were happy and unraveling when they weren't, because that was an unfair expectation to think that like they were never going to be sad, or everything was going to work out all the time, And it was more because I needed that regulation, right? When they were upset, it made me upset. When things were going wrong in their world, it's sort of like, I think mindfulness is really an opportunity to be able to accept the things you cannot control, which is a whole lot of things, right? And as a parent, you have this perceived notion of control, right? But so much is out of our control, right?
Yes.
But we have this sort of idea that we can control a lot. And I think it's really freeing when you can finally surrender that. And I think for kids, it's kind of when you go in and you teach some of these things, even a deep breath, and you teach it in a way that's not just take a deep breath, like I'll say that to kids, or you need to calm down, you need to relax. And like, it sounds like someone's being mean to you, but they're really offering you something that's really helpful. And you give them these like simple tools and techniques, and they're like, huh. And I find, I don't know if they're all just, trying to kiss up to me when I come in week after week, but I do find that I hear these really beautiful stories of how they're doing it. And you know what? I believe them because they're kids, and kids are pretty honest.
Yeah.
But I hear these stories and I think, it's not so they're not adults, right? Their brains are not that complicated yet. They're not overcomplicating that much. So I really do think it's easier for them to implement these ideas. I do. So I think that is really the crux of why you have to start young. It's really hard to teach an old dog new tricks. It's hard at 35 to start your meditation practice when you've been so honed in on how to do things.
Well, yeah. And if you think about, even talking to like my peers about meditation, and I was one of them, right? Like, I can't meditate. I can't sit by myself, right? And it speaks to what you were saying of like, we are constantly moving, constantly absorbing, constantly going, that when we ask ourselves to just be, that can be really hard. And that can be like incredibly uncomfortable. But I also love what you said about recognizing that we can't control our children's emotional state, right? And that the goal is not to be happy all the time. Like, I think so much of mindfulness is that acceptance of the good and the bad, like the whole human condition, the big, beautiful mess that it is, of being able to sit through that discomfort of like boredom and noticing my mind is not stopping and noticing that I want to pick up my phone instead of sit for the 90 seconds, 3 minutes, 5, 10 minutes of meditation that I said I was going to do, right? It's a challenge. It's a challenge.
It was one of the first things we learned in that first meditation class I took with Rama. She said, I've come to find through my years of doing this work that you're not all going to start meditating for 30 minutes a day. She goes, well, that would be nice. And that would be my goal for all of you. I would take whatever I can get. So she said, how many minutes of your day are you willing to give back to yourself? And when she put it that way, I was like, whoa, right? Because most of the stuff that you're racing to do are not entirely for yourself. Yes, you think they're going to make you feel better because the laundry's done and you made a beautiful dinner and you went and picked up your kids, you did your work, you paid your bills, you did all the check, so that then I can be calm and relaxed. But you're not. Then you're just moving on to the next thing, So I think when she put it that way, it was like, oh, and when she lowered the stakes of like, it doesn't have to be, just try 2 minutes. She was try 2 minutes, 120 seconds, 2 minutes. And it was like, and the truth is, even 2 minutes makes a difference of just closing your eyes, sitting in stillness, noticing how you're feeling, taking a few breaths, noticing sort of, she also, you are not your mind, sort of this like separating from your mind. There's you, and then there's this mind that's swirling all the time, right? And we sometimes attach a meaning to every single thing that's coming up when it's not all real. It's just what we're, tossing around in there in a day, right? Some of it's meaningful and real, and a lot of it isn't, And to your point about anxiety, well, my youngest daughter struggled with tremendous anxiety. I mean, debilitating for years. And she fought through and worked through and so many years and she's 19 and she's in college now. And she really is in a much, much better place. Over the weekend, we were visiting her and at school. And a terrible thing had happened to one of her teammates' family. One of her teammates' sister's best friends died in a plane accident. And as we were leaving, she said, did you guys hear what happened? And we said, yes, we weren't sure, what you knew. The day was so busy. And she said they died. She found out at halftime that they died. And my daughter's on a dance team with this girl, and the girls, it was a great game. It was a big, huge night game, and we were having a blast. And she got the news at halftime that they found the family and this is what happened. And she said, I feel so bad enjoying myself right now while I know this is happening. And so there's lots of good work to do around that too. But my whole point in telling you the story is Tess is telling us this as we're leaving to get in the car to go to the airport. And she goes, so get home safely, you guys. And we said, don't worry. And I tried to calm her nerves a little, I'm like, it was a private plane and they flew into bad weather and it's really difficult in those situations. And of course it was on my mind. And I had this feeling like, is this going to tick up a little anxiety in her? So we're on the plane and I texted her to tell her we were getting ready to take off. She's replied to just me and said, I'm feeling really anxious. And I said, I know. And then she replied back and she said, I think it's the plane thing. And I said, I know, I can understand that. I said, we'll be okay. I'll text you as soon as we land. And she said, I just had to say it out loud. And I said, Yeah. I said, when you can name it, you can tame it. But my point of sharing the story was her anxiety used to sweep her under the rug. And Tess, who before all doing all kinds of work, mindfulness and DBT therapy and all cognitive behavioral therapy, all sorts of things to sort of rewire the situation, that would have really strung her out. Like that could have debilitated her, this like idea. And then she, her head got going like, I said that to them before. Why did I even bring that up to them before they got on the plane? Did I manifest something? Like, no, you can't.
Our mind can do wild things. Isn't it incredible?
It's incredible. So, we have this little exchange, and it was like, she just had to acknowledge that was what was making her anxious. And she felt it, she felt probably the yucky feeling in her chest or the discomfort in her stomach or whatever it was. And then she was like, she attached some meaning to it. And this is probably where it's coming from, that I'm nervous my family's not going to get home safely. Totally reasonable
Total
after
sense.
what you just heard. And that was mindfulness, right? I say to the kids all the time, mindfulness is not always about being calm, cool, and collective and relaxed. And this mindfulness is knowing that I don't feel like this, and I just need to understand what's going on instead of reacting to why I'm not feeling,
You brought up a couple things. So even when we were talking about the meditation, it's that opportunity to, even if it's for 2 minutes, a feeling fun fact that we learn and notice is that most emotions have a physical shelf life of 90 seconds. So if we are feeling a big feeling and we cannot meditate for 30 minutes, you don't have to. You can give yourself 90 seconds and just see if by focusing on your breath versus the feeling or the story, if it just lessens the emotional load. So what I love is that you use the word notice, and it's just brilliant that this organization is called Notice, versus solve. The goal of mindfulness, and we never even said the definition of mindfulness on the show. I really just dove in. The goal of mindfulness is not to not feel those feelings or to solve for those feelings, whether they are our feelings or our children's feelings, right? Like this idea that that emotions are something that need to be solved. No, they're emotions. Emotions are just experiences in your body, and we notice them. And sometimes there is something we can do to tend to them. I love that story. To simply name it gives me some distance from it. To sometimes, especially when we're talking to like the elementary school students, if we can't even like put it in terms of anxiety, I notice my stomach is growling and my temper is getting a little short. Maybe this is my body's way of saying, I'm hungry. And what can I do to tend to that feeling? I can go eat, right? So it's just the noticing. And yes, sometimes there is that solution, but other times it's just to be present to it and to let it run its course. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, we say to the kids, just the word emotion has motion in it. So emotions are meant to move, right? They're meant, we say too, like it's a feedback loop. Your emotions or your feelings are information. Your body, your mind, it's trying to tell you something. It's either trying to say, hey, I don't like this. This is making me angry. This is annoying me. This is right. And it's not about how can I make it stop, right? How can I get how can I remove this person from my universe because they're driving me crazy right now? No. What? Okay. That's information. What about this is upsetting you? What's making you anxious? In terms of what my daughter did, she got a feeling. I know her. She probably got a little stomach ache. She probably got a little, it's like, I got to get out of here kind of feeling. That's sort of how her anxiety shows up. And then she thought about it. Where's this coming from? How come all of a sudden I'm feeling anxious right now? I haven't done this in a while. So it's just having the awareness. And if you don't have the awareness, if you don't give yourself that pause or that allow your body to communicate, like you said, it will get louder. Things will start to happen. Anxiety can become a condition. It can become a problem. So can depression and sadness. And sometimes these are anxiety, depression. Sometimes there are things you can't just control with some mindfulness and meditation. And guess what? Then you can go get help, right? You can go do something further. And that's what I say. Like, you have to listen to what your body is telling you. And feelings and emotions are just information. They're not the end. They're not the end game. We have this great quote that we use a lot in our teaching by Pema Chodron, who's like the master of, Buddhist mindfulness, all the teachings. And she says, you are the sky, everything else is just the weather. And we ask the kids what they think that means. And really, like, we are the sky. We are the container that holds it all. But the weather is just our emotions and our feelings, right? The weather changes. It happens to be beautiful and sunny and gorgeous. I think it rained yesterday. I wasn't home, but I heard there was a bad storm in the morning. And then by the afternoon, it cleared up. We're the same way, right? The weather moves. The sky holds it all, right? The sky is always the sky. So are we. We are always this. And sometimes we're happy, and sometimes we're angry, and sometimes we're excited, and sometimes we're sad. And the mindfulness is knowing and not getting stuck there. I once went to we had a psychologist come on one of the parent boards that I was come speak to the families. She was the first person I heard about the 90-second rule. And she talked about it in terms of your kid's behavior. And it blew my mind. And she said, when your kid is tantruming, having big feelings, right? Experiencing something, and you're going at it with them, right? And you send them to their room to calm down. And then you go up there and you're ready to go at it again, and they're not calm yet. And she's like, you know what you do? She's like, you reset. Every time you go in there and you re-engage, or you talk to them before they're ready to be spoken to, before their system is calmed down. She's like, you reset, you reset, you reset. She's like, so while you think your kid is having a tantrum for 3 or 4 hours, and you think that's how long anger tantrums last, she's like, no, they've lasted that long because either you kept resetting it or they kept resetting it.
Yeah.
And that was mind-blowing to me at the time. And then years later, when I start doing this work, it's like, okay, what's the feeling? What's going on? Because the more you engage it, like in a sort of healthy way, as opposed to fighting it and resisting, it's the resistance that builds it, right? What we resist persists. So that's the idea here. Like, when I notice myself starting to rage up or I want to like lash out, I'm like, okay, what can you do here? Because by the way, responding from that place is usually not a good idea. You're going to spend so much time sort of apologizing and retracing your steps. And I'm really sorry. And this is what happened. And I shouldn't have talked to you that way. So it's like, and again, those things are going to happen. We're going to still have those moments,
Eternal work in progress here. I'm well into my 40s and on this mindfulness journey, and like, I don't get it right all the time. I definitely lose my cool
and we're not,
all the time.
And we're not going to, and we're not supposed to, and being human is messy, but like the mindfulness piece is really helpful because it just helps you. It helps you have a more enjoyable existence, right? You don't want to sit around in a cloud of anger and be upset about, even like with everything going on in the news, you could make yourself crazy. You have to use mindfulness to disengage. A lot of it is out of your control. Some of it's in your control. There's things you can do about it. And once you've done the things you can do, you got to back it up, go for a walk, get out in nature, enjoy what's right here in front of you. That's also, I think, something really important about mindfulness. Mindfulness is noticing and paying attention to what's happening right here, right now, in the present moment. So much of what is working us up is something that happened yesterday, something that we're anticipating. Anxiety is an anticipation a lot. It's usually not about the moment. It's often about something that hasn't even happened and probably never will happen.
Yep.
Right? Because the truth is, when it does happen, you're going to figure out how to handle it. Most of what you're worrying about probably isn't going to happen. So how do you get present? And yes, that doesn't mean sometimes in the present moment there isn't shitty stuff happening in the present moment, that there is sometimes, but you still have to address it and deal with it. So it's like, what can you do in the present moment, right? You can breathe, you can sit in, a mindful state, you can go for a walk, you can pay attention to the beautiful trees, you can put your face up into the sun, you can do something to sort of ground yourself so that you can handle whatever's happening, or you can really enjoy we were in Alabama at the football game on Saturday night, and it was like electric, the energy, like it was so fun. And my older daughter was next to me, and she had a situation happening with a friend and was upset, she wasn't getting the response she wanted. And I looked at her and I go, just try to be right here, right now. I'm like, look, like this is like so fun. And the energy in this room, I'm like, you can deal with that later. Let's just try to be right here. I'm not saying what's going on isn't important or your feelings don't matter, but I'm like, can you just like come right here? Because we won't get this.
Yeah. And when
And
we
that's
have
the mindfulness. It's like I get to choose, right? It's free will. You get to make decisions. And like, you can sit here and be pouty about whatever's going on. Totally your call. But I'm just letting you know there's something like insanely fun going on around us that like this will be over in a little bit.
Yeah. And that whole situation will be there. And what's so
Yeah.
interesting is that when we have the ability to say, be here now, right? Pay attention on purpose to what is happening right here, right now. When we come back to that external situation, whether it's something with a friend or name it, right? It probably feels a little more manageable. When we stay in it, it's almost like we go down this rabbit hole, especially if it's anxiety with those what if and worst case scenarios. But when we're able to say, and this is one of the tools that I used to give my daughter of like, girl, you can have all your big feelings, but your big feelings can't have you all the time. So like if we have a test, but we're feeling big feelings about what happened at lunch with our friends, can we like very lovingly say, hey, I need to put this on the shelf for right now so I can be here right now. So I can be right here right now. And then when you come back to the shelf, it might look a little bit different. It might not, but sometimes, most of the time it does.
Well, it's like when you get a heated email or you get a heated text, like your gut reaction sometimes is not to respond and say is not always the best, response. Sometimes you got to sit with it because guess what? In an hour, in 2 hours, in a little bit, you might not be so charged by it and you might be able to see it a little differently. It's like the mindfulness jar. We don't, when it's all stirred up, right? That's not when you want to make your response. That's not when you want to rebuttal. You want to wait till some of that settles so you can see things more clearly.
Yeah.
And that's in everything in life, right?
Yeah.
Let the feelings come and then let them go. And then you'll know how to react. We say a lot, free will. You get to choose in any moment. And I think when you take a step back, things don't look as big as they do in the big feeling. They don't seem as urgent. And that's a huge lesson to teach kids. Everything isn't urgent. Everything doesn't have to happen right now. And guess what? We're living in immediate gratification world, right? You can go on Amazon and I could be sitting here right now and I could get paper towels delivered to my front door if I wanted to. There's this immediacy in the way that we're living. We can connect with anybody. I can check in with my kids in ways that we couldn't before, So I think, being able to have that ability to settle is really important.
Julie, as we close out the show, anything else you want to add of a greatest hit of mindfulness, of what a mom can do to help bring mindfulness into her home? The floor is yours.
I always like to say to parents, especially families that want, how do we do this? How do you do this? And I say, start small, low, like what my teacher said to me. How many minutes are you willing to give back? And I say, just start trying it, before your kids get into the car at pickup line, take a couple deep breaths, get off your phone. Can you get into like a healthier mindset? I think, we learn by example. I've been doing this for a long time. My kids were not on board. My oldest especially is like, that's not my thing. I don't do mindfulness, but yet she does it in so many other ways, through so many other modalities. She has these like calming techniques and she respects and appreciates so much what I do. She didn't want to hear it from me. But through my own practice, right, and through my own examples, she sees it. My younger one was definitely more interested and we could talk about it and she was more on board with it. But I think for a parent, start your own practice in the real light and gentle way and start trying these things out first, because sometimes your shift is all the shift your kids need. Lead
right.
by example.
Right. If we want them to take the deep breath.
Be willing to tell them when you don't, to like own up to when like totally was like all over the place, distracted, not paying attention. Here's how it helped me and here's how I'm going to do it differently next. This is all the human experience, right? And we're all just trying to figure it out.
And with organizations like KNOWTICE, it makes it a bit easier to understand that whole human experience, the big, beautiful, messy human experience that we're all living.
Yep.
Well, Julie, you know how I feel about KNOWTICE and how I feel about you. I feel so blessed to be a part of this work and part of this mission. So thank you so much. If you are interested in learning more about what KNOWTICE does, go to knowtice.org. That is with a K, KNOWTICE.org. And if you want us in your school, knowtice.org. We would love to bring this to every school and every student because we all need it. Julie, my friend, thank you so much.
Thank you.
My friends, why didn't they tell us that mindfulness is not just for us later in life, that one day we can go 100 miles per hour and then slow down in our 30s, 40s, or beyond. Mindfulness is for all of us. And the younger we are to plant those seeds, the bigger they grow sooner. Till next time, my friend. Love what you hear? Well, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me at confidencecoachforgirls.com. That's confidencecoachforgirls.com. Or email me at lesliethelifecoach@gmail.com. That's lesliethelifecoach@gmail.com. Hope to hear from you.